What is up, everybody? Welcome to this Champions League recap here on Touchline Talk. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the content going out on the channel. Before I start, I want to acknowledge the PSG ownership situation. It is an important topic of conversation. It should be discussed in the broader context of everything. This is not the day I am choosing to do that. I'm choosing to focus on the game, what it means objectively for the club, for these players, and that side of it, because that part's important too. There is time later down the line, and it will always be a conversation because it is part of this PSG story. So I'm not going to focus on that here. I did want to acknowledge it, state it right off the bat. Now let's jump in. I have made this point in my 5 things from the week before that if you take out the messy time period at PSG, they are as good a bet as anybody outside of Real Madrid to get into the late rounds of the Champions League. They did it before Messi. They've done it after Messi. Of course, they haven't gotten to final after final. Obviously, they hadn't won one until, 10 minutes ago. But they had performed well. Things could have gone differently. They could have won that first final. They could have gone farther last year. And so this idea that they can't show up in this tournament is just factually incorrect. And of course, there are the stereotypes that come with that game against Barcelona and the collapse and what happened and having Messi there, all of these things. But just objectively speaking, they're really good at this. And they went away from that, the formula that was working, to go for the superstars. And that was when they didn't succeed in this tournament, which is obviously all that matters and the only priority they have because everything else is as close to a guarantee as you can pretty much get in this sport. And so that's an important thing to think about in the context of all this. I'm not particularly surprised. Nobody should be surprised. Now, of course, the way that they did this, and we'll get into that, certainly didn't see that coming. But this idea that they are going to be one of the most dangerous teams in this tournament, even though they don't have big names, relative to PSG teams of the past, relative to Real Madrid, that's kind of when they do their best work in the Champions League. And there is something to be said for that, and this season, this group of players, this success proves that. They got back to their foundation, which is having some high-level experienced players, your Marquinhoses, your Achraf Hakimis, with your incredibly talented youngsters, that you have the ability to continue to produce, in part because of the location you have. And then you go spend to fill out the rest of the team, whether it's the midfielders, Kvaratskhelia, right? They have money to go buy other big-time talent. But this is the formula that has worked. And just from a soccer standpoint, it is a really cool thing for me personally to see the way that this team operates. And obviously, a lot of people have talked about this, that they're really fun to watch. They just run all over the place. You can't figure out where they are going to be positionally. Just aesthetically, it's very pleasing. I mean, look at the goals they scored in this game. My goodness. They're really fun to watch. But it is also completely driven by that midfield. And that midfield does not, yes, of course they have goal involvements and they help in the attack and they contribute goals and assists every once in a while. But Ousmane Dembele did more in attack by himself than the trio of midfielders did combined across all competitions this season. That's not what they do. What they do is take away all of your space, all of your time. They set the tempo for the game, and they create space for PSG because they're really good at operating in tight spaces. They understand where they need to be. They open up space by filling in the gaps when Achraf Hakimi is going who knows where, and Ousmane Dembele's dropping back, and all of these things are happening. They do all of the stuff that doesn't show up on the stat sheet so incredibly well. And it is why they have been the best midfield in Europe and in the world this season. Right? They're not big flashy names. It's not like you've got a Kevin De Bruyne in there who is clearly attack-minded. It's not even like you have a Declan Rice in there who you know has a presence, whether it's free kicks or getting on the ends of set pieces or those kind of, crashing the box. He has an attacking presence even. That's really not what these three do. Yes, you've had, Vitinha obviously is a really technical player who could score some really good goals and has. But between these three and the way that they dominated this game and have dominated all season and absolutely suffocated people, and what has happened to Manchester City with the Rodri injury and the way that that derailed this season and has derailed them whenever he has been unavailable, that is the biggest takeaway from a really broad picture standpoint for me this season. And I wanted to make sure that I talked about this. Is these can be these two-way midfielders, these holding midfielders, whatever you want to call them. Obviously, PSG plays very differently than the role Rodri has for Manchester City. But these kind of players can be, and often are, the most valuable players on your team. They are every bit as valuable as an elite goal scorer, right? Of course you need players like Ousmane Dembele to put the ball in the back of the net and create chances. But that in itself doesn't get you where you need to be. And so I just wanted to take a moment to give a round of applause to those three because they were absolutely sensational, and that was really the story of this game. Inter simply were not ready for what they came up against. It was too fast. It was too intense. They took away all of the space. You couldn't do anything when you got the ball. They couldn't put passes together because of the pressure. And it all kind of snowballed from there. There really isn't much to analyze in the game itself because it was such one-way traffic. But ultimately, where we got to is that the best team in the world won this competition. And that is not often the case. I do not believe Real Madrid were the best team in the world last season. They have certainly won this in years where they weren't the best team. You think of the Liverpool team, the Chelsea team. This is not a good indicator of who the best team in the world is. I will stand by that until the day I die. That's not what knockout tournaments are supposed to do. But every once in a while, it works out that way. Not only that you're the best team in the tournament, because that's something different, but that overall just the best team won this tournament. So you look at PSG's resume. They're the 11th team to complete a treble. They played in 3 finals. They didn't allow a goal. They won every competition they competed in, and yeah, the 4th one is questionable and not a full competition. So we're really talking about 3, right? Your traditional league, your League Cup, and the Champions League. They won them all. They did it in pretty convincing fashion. And the only blemish on their record is that weird stretch where they played some really good teams at the beginning of the league phase of Champions League. And it didn't go well, right? Your Arsenal's, your Atletico Madrid's. I believe there's also a Bayern Munich game in there. That was the one rough spot in this season. And that is what this new format allows you to do, is that they regrouped, they did what they needed to do, and they were just fine. Now, the flip side to that, and why I don't hold that against them almost at all, is I said from the very beginning, this was also something I wrote about in 5 Things from the Week, from the day that the league phase schedule was revealed, that PSG were going to determine how this thing goes. Because they had the toughest schedule of anybody out there. They were playing most of the other big teams. And so if they were really good in the league phase or really bad, that was going to determine how this all played out. And they weren't very good, which meant they were down there at the bottom having to make sure that they actually found a way to get through to the playoff round. But if they had somebody else's schedule, it probably wouldn't have gone that way. And obviously, nobody is going to remember that. That's not what this season is about. It is the footnote that is going to be easily forgotten, and rightfully so. My point is simply that's the biggest struggle we had here. And, oh, by the way, the other team that has an argument to be the best team in the world, they knocked them out. And I know it was very tight. Liverpool maybe should have won, probably should have won. So it is close between those two teams. Because I don't put a lot of stock, especially relative to everybody else, in winning the Champions League in terms of determining whether you're the best team in the world. Said that time and time again. But Liverpool won one trophy and had the opportunity for 4. PSG had 3 tournaments and another game that they could win for a trophy. That, for the purposes of this part of the conversation, I'm going to take out, right? Because that doesn't count when you're comparing it to the Carabao Cup. So Liverpool had more opportunities and ended with 1. PSG went 3 for 3. And obviously, Ligue 1 is not the Premier League. But that has to count for something. I'm also not a big believer in head-to-head, so this is not about PSG getting through at Liverpool's expense in the Champions League. But PSG did knock out the Premier League champions, the Premier League runners-up, and Serie A's runners-up, plus another Premier League team in Aston Villa. It's not like they had a cupcake schedule to get here, and they blew the doors off Inter in this game. They are the best team in the world. They clearly leave with the best resume. And there were other teams that had the opportunity to do that. Inter, until just a few weeks ago, had that opportunity. Liverpool were the front runners until they started losing cup competitions and then got knocked out of the Champions League. Barcelona had that opportunity until they couldn't get past Inter. There were all of these teams that could have pulled off a treble, or could have at least won a league and won the Champions League. And it was PSG who found a way to get it done. You got to give them credit for that. And then the final thing, kind of going back to where I started this. Think about this statistic for a second. There are now 3 teams who, in the past 6 seasons, right, this decade, starting with the 2020 Champions League final, have made it twice, made it multiple times, and won the Champions League. Those teams are Real Madrid, Manchester City, and PSG. They have done the exact same thing as Manchester City in this competition since they made it that first time and lost to Bayern Munich in the final. I know it's not the exact same, and there have been some disappointing exits, but Manchester City have had disappointing exits too. They have a team that is built to excel in this competition. The team that wasn't was the team that was built around 3 superstars who don't do any running. Before that and after that, they have been as dangerous as any team in this competition outside Real Madrid. And so, we'll see where this goes from here. I'm not going to overreact and believe this is going to start being a dynasty. Certainly, they're well equipped to go win next season. You get a full season of Kvicha Kvaratskhelia, who, by the way, is a Serie A winner, a Ligue 1 winner, and a Champions League winner, which is a remarkable series of events and accomplishment for him. Just such a cool story, his background, the way he's exploded, and he's just a brilliant player. But we'll see. We'll see if they can follow this up, if they can get back to another final. Because you just never know, right? Everybody was singing Real Madrid's praises this time 12 months ago, talking about how they were going to build off of this because Kylian Mbappe was coming. They didn't win a trophy. Their manager's gone. Things can change quickly. And PSG, this is really all anybody cares about. And for fair reasons. But if one weird thing happens, if they don't get past Liverpool, we're having a very different conversation. That is part of the reality of the situation. But they did get past Liverpool. They were comprehensive and clearly the best team after that. I'm not really holding that against them because in order to win knockout tournaments, weird things are going to happen. You got to find a way to fight through the chaos and to overcome it. You got to get some luck and some breaks that go your way. Sometimes you just got to find a way to survive a round. What you can't do is survive round after round after round after round. It's been my criticism with Real Madrid, although they seem to find a way to survive most of the time, just not every time. PSG needed to survive one round. They did it. Other than that, they were just better than the teams they played. Maybe this turns into something where they're here every other season, something like that. Maybe it's a lot of getting to the quarterfinals, semifinals, getting to the final sometimes, more in the Manchester City, Bayern Munich area. You could throw Inter Milan in there maybe now too, where certainly you're not going to rule them out of winning the competition, but they're not doing it every season or two the way that Real Madrid and Barcelona kind of have over the past decade to 2 decades. We'll see. All I know is right now, for this season, they're not only deserving winners, they are the best team in Europe, they are the best team in the world, and nobody can ever take that away from these players. Whatever the context may be in terms of how you feel about PSG, the ownership situation, all that. Today is about the players, about the coaching staff, about Luis Enrique, about what they accomplished, largest margin of victory in Champions League history, and finally, for better or for worse, PSG's project reaches the pinnacle, the ultimate conclusion, and finally they are lifting the Champions League trophy. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, be sure to hit that subscribe button. I'll see you next time.